The president of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, has begun, and you may have seen this in the press, seizing land from his own citizens without compensation because they are the wrong skin color. That is literally the definition of racism. Racism is what our elites say they dislike most. Donald Trump is a racist, they say. But they paid no attention to this at all. In fact, Ramaphosa is one of Barack Obama's favorite leaders in the world. In a speech just a few weeks ago, Obama praised him. He praised the racist government of South Africa and Ramaphosa by name for, quote, inspiring hope throughout the country. Does our current bureaucratic elite agree with that? Apparently they do. We called over to the State Department for comment on South Africa's land seizures which should be getting worldwide attention because they are immoral but are getting basically none. And the State Department replied with what is honestly an unbelievable statement. We're going to quote it for you at length. Here it is, quote, "We are aware of these reports and have been following this issue very closely for some time. South Africa is a strong democracy with resilient institutions, including a free press and an independent judiciary. South Africans are grappling with the difficult issue of land reform through an open process, including public hearings, broad-based consultations, and active civil society engagement. President Ramaphosa has pledged that the land reform process will follow the rule of law and its implementation will not adversely affect economic growth, agricultural production, or food security." End quote. State Department did not mention that by following the rule of law, he has changed the country's constitution to make it possible to steal land from people because they are the wrong skin color. In other words, nothing to see here, says Mike Pompeo's State Department. It's totally okay for South Africa to steal property for racist reasons because they are, quote, a strong democracy and held, quote, public hearings. Criminals, take note, find a buddy, start robbing State Department employees on their way to work. By their logic, as long as you outnumber them, they'll be okay with getting robbed because it's democracy. I thought the whole point of the new South Africa and the reason the rest of us were excited to see it in 1994 take shape is because it rejected racial discrimination. And yet the government is now embracing it. Or am I missing something?
No. In a free and civilized society, we don't take people's stuff on the basis of the color of their skin. It was wrong when it took place under apartheid. It is wrong now. And it would be a tragedy if South Africa were to repeat the same mistakes it did in the past.
So there are really two levels here. First is the moral level, and you and I are in agreement that it's always wrong to punish people for what they look like. But second is the effect that it will have. We saw something similar to this happen in neighboring Zimbabwe. What happened when land was seized there on the basis of skin color?
18 years ago, the governing party of Zimbabwe, ZANU-PF, was threatened with electoral loss. And in order to shore up its support amongst the electorate, it decided to expropriate the farmers of Zimbabwe. What that led to, aside from horrific violence, was a total economic collapse of the country. Half a century of economic growth was wiped out in Zimbabwe as a result of this particular policy. The country experienced hyperinflation and had to abandon its currency. The country's unemployment rate was roughly 90%. Life expectancy plummeted. Child mortality increased. And, of course, the agricultural production has collapsed and hunger ensued. Cyril Ramaphosa has said that by expropriating the farmland, the privately owned farmland in South Africa, he's going to create the Garden of Eden in South Africa. He's going to turn South Africa into hell, just like Zimbabwe is a complete catastrophe. The president saw our segment and tweeted this response to it, quote, "I have asked Secretary of State Pompeo to closely study the South Africa land and farm seizures and expropriations and the large-scale killings of farmers." Today, the State Department elaborated on the president's tweet. Here's part of it.
I should mention that the expropriation of land without compensation, our position is that that would risk sending South Africa down the wrong path. We continue to encourage a peaceful and transparent public debate about what we consider to be a very important issue, and the South Africans certainly do as well.
So, I mean, that was kind of tepid, I guess. It's not going to solve the problem, but it's basically good news. Pushing back against racial discrimination is always worth doing. And yet, for some reason, a reason no one really explained, luminaries in the media disagreed. They were offended by that. In an Orwellian turn, various news outlets suggested it was somehow racist to oppose the racist policies of the South African government, even Nazi-like. Watch.
He goes to race. And what better way than to give this neo-Nazi propaganda that white farmers are being killed in South Africa, when in fact that is not true, not based on them being white.
So show that clip to anyone who knows South Africa, who lives there, and see how they respond. They'll laugh bitterly. It's ludicrous. It's a lie. The president of the country, Cyril Ramaphosa, has pledged to change South Africa's constitution in order to legalize the seizure of property without compensation. That's currently being debated in the parliament in South Africa. Even now, the government is trying to confiscate 2 game farms after the owners refused to sell at a fraction of the market price. Everyone in the country understands what these are. They're racial attacks.
This is one of the sort of unauthorized victim groups around the world. We have authorized ones that we're allowed to be concerned about, the various minority groups. But when it comes to the president or other people, the vice president defending Christians in the Middle East, even defending Muslims in Burma, defending Christians in Burma who are also beleaguered, 60 churches burned there, defending Muslims in China, these are not the ordinary victim groups that the left cares about. And that flows over to our State Department bureaucracy at times, unfortunately. And so you see just not a lot of regard and interest for this. We also don't have a political ambassador yet down in South Africa, which means that our representation down there, frankly, is weak.
Yeah. And by the way, just to be totally clear, I'm very wary of getting too involved in the internal dealings of any country unless it directly benefits the United States. So I'm not calling for any dramatic action, but people do listen to what our State Department says, and it seems like it would just be low cost to say, the United States doesn't think that you should punish people on the basis of their appearance. So is the president, do you think, going to keep up with this issue, or is it the criticism, do you think, going to slow him down?
No, I think that, across the board, the president has been very good about some of the forgotten people, not only here in the United States, but people who around the world are beleaguered. I mentioned Christians in the Middle East, really no one aside from Trump speaking up for them, not even the Pope, not anyone like that. So I think you're going to see this. And, Pompeo has been, by necessity, very focused. North Korea, Iran, Syria.
Right.
This is, as you point out, not an area where there are fundamental U.S. interests at stake.
Okay, say defenders of the South African government in this country. But previous generations in South Africa, under the apartheid government, also seized land on racial grounds. And by the way, that is absolutely true. They did do that. And it's one of the reasons that so many decent people in this country and around the world opposed apartheid. Apartheid was awful and wrong. Things have changed, though. Now our elites endorse the idea of a racial spoils system. And that's the scariest part. It's far more ominous than whatever the corrupt and incompetent government of South Africa is doing. Our ruling class now believes in collective punishment. That is the opposite of justice. Nobody is alleging that individual farm owners in South Africa stole their land. Instead, the claim is that people who resemble them did, and that's enough. Our elites see no problem with that standard. That should worry you a lot. If you got mugged, how would you feel about imprisoning someone who just happened to look like the mugger? How about the mugger's children? Should they be punished too? If those sound like insane questions, that's because they are insane questions. In the West, we punish only the guilty. We do not punish their descendants or everyone with the same hair and eye color. For more than 200 years, pretty much everybody in America agreed on those terms. Now, the people who run our country aren't so sure. How should the U.S. administration respond to this human rights tragedy that we're watching unfold?
Well, the first thing that needs to be made clear is to denounce the policy. The administration needs to make it very clear that it is both immoral, because it targets a specific group of people, and I thought we were beyond that. And secondly, that it would be economically destructive. So we need to make it very clear where we stand. Secondly, South African government needs to be aware that the law, the African Growth and Opportunity Act, under which South Africa trades with the United States, requires the President of the United States to expel countries from AGOA that do not respect property rights and due process. So South African government needs to be aware that if it changes the constitution and legalizes what is essentially theft of private property, it will be kicked out of AGOA, and further negative economic consequences will ensue.
Julius Malema is the leader of the country's third largest political party. He's one of South Africa's most famous figures. Here's what he said 2 years ago about murdering people on the basis of their skin color. Watch this.
I don't know what's going to happen in the future. I'm saying to you, we have not called for the killing of white people, at least for now. I can't guarantee the future.
Yeah, but I mean, you'd understand somebody watching that, especially as it gets shared on Twitter, they freak out. It sounds like a genocidal call.
Cry babies.
Malema hasn't become any more moderate. He's become more radical, and not coincidentally, he's become more popular. Here's Malema just a few months ago.
When you want to hit them hard, go after a white man. They feel a terrible pain. We are starting with this whiteness. We are cutting the throat of whiteness.
Malema, by the way, is not a fringe figure in South African politics. He's a pivotal figure in South African politics. He saw the president's tweet last night, and much like the Washington Post, Malema was offended by it. Notice how he makes certain to blame Jews for good measure. Watch this. This is from today.
Donald Trump is not saying anything we have not heard from white people. There's a group of white right-wingers who are being trained by Jews in Pretoria to be snipers. Only death will stop us. Not Trump, not poverty, not sanctions.
That right there is what our ruling class is now defending.